Guten Tag, meine Damen und Herren, und willkommen zurück. Es ist wunderbar, dass Sie wieder da sind. Let's start today where we left off in our last lesson, namely that if you're serious about learning a foreign language, the best place to start is not necessarily here, or even with a dictionary or a textbook. Instead, the place that we should all begin is right here, das Herz. Ask yourself, what's my reason for learning German? What do I feel is so important that it will motivate me throughout my journey? Because I can tell you from experience, that one thing can make all the difference. Maybe you're wondering, as some of my students do, what was Professor Frem's reason for learning German? Why did he get started on his journey? So if you don't mind, I'd like to tell you about it. Ja? Dankeschön, Dankeschön. Also dann, come back with me a few years, back to the fall of 1993. Ach, wer ist dieser junge Mann? Das bin ich. Ich bin 16 Jahre alt und ich lerne Deutsch in der Schule. I'm a sophomore in high school, 16 years old, and just starting with German. And one day, my German teacher, her name was Frau Schaaf. By the way, later on, I learned that Frau Schaaf means Miss Sheep in German. So anyway, Frau Schaaf announces to the class, we're starting an exchange program with the school in Germany. Is anyone interested in going this summer? And fortunately for me, on this particular day, I'm actually paying attention because I raise my hand and I say, Ich bin interessiert. Well, I didn't really say it in German, but I did say, I'm interested. And honestly, that's how it started. I raised my hand and I said, Ich bin interessiert. Now, let's fast forward a few months, and we're in June of 1994. Da bin ich wieder. Es ist Sommer und ich bin in Deutschland. My American classmates and I are standing in a dance studio in Neu-Ulm, which is a city in southwestern Germany. And we're sitting there and we're watching students from this local school perform a traditional Bavarian-style dance. And the next thing I know, we're all being paired up with dancers so they can teach us the moves. And wouldn't you know it, I'm the last one to get a partner. I'm just standing there looking like a lost Hündchen, a little dog. Ach, der arme, junge James, hat keinen Tanzpartner. So the dance instructor takes me by the hand, all the while saying something in German that I didn't really understand, and he leads me over to this attractive young lady with these soft brown eyes. Hallo, she says to me. Mein Name ist Katharina. And for a moment, I can't talk. My heart's pounding. I can feel my cheeks turning red. So I summon all the German at my disposal and I say to Katharina, Hallo, mein Name ist James. Ich komme aus Oregon. And now, let's fast forward again, this time a few months after this auspicious first meeting between myself and Katharina. I'm sitting in a beanbag in my room. I have pen and paper in hand, and my dad's dictionary from college is lying on the floor next to me, and I'm laboring on this letter to, guess who? Katharina. And this is more or less what I wrote. Liebe Katharina, wie geht es dir? Es geht mir sehr gut. Das Wetter hier ist nicht so gut. Es regnet viel. Wie ist das Wetter in Neu-Ulm? Hoffentlich komme ich im Sommer wieder nach Deutschland. Kannst du nach Oregon kommen? Ich bin sehr froh. Ich vermisse dich. Dein James. Now, it wasn't anywhere near the fancy prose that I can produce today, but it got the job done. And so this whole thing went on for a year. I'd spend an hour cobbling together a letter to Katharina, and then a few weeks later she would write back, in German of course, and she would give me tips on my previous letter. And then I would write her back, again laboring on every sentence, and she would write me back, and so on and so forth. And then, in the spring of 1995, guess who my family hosted for 2 weeks when a group of exchange students from Neu-Ulm came to my high school in Oregon? Das ist richtig, Katharina. And let me tell you, those 2 weeks were awesome. Katharina and I spoke only German to each other. And I remember she said to me, Ich möchte, dass du dein Deutsch übst. I want you to practice your German. And well, I didn't argue. Also dann, meine Damen und Herren, that's my story. That really is how my journey through the German language began. And I know it's kind of corny and innocent, but really that's how I found my motivation here. So tell me, what do you think your story will be? Gut. And now let's get on with our journey then, shall we? We're going to start with 3 run-of-the-mill nouns. Are you ready? Der Arm, die Hand, das Haus. As you can see, all these German words are clear cognates with their English translations. However, unlike English, each one of these German nouns also has a definite article indicating its grammatical gender. The first word, der Arm, is masculine. Auf Deutsch, we say that der Arm is maskulin or männlich. Die Hand is a feminine noun. Auf Deutsch, feminin or weiblich. Das Haus is a neuter noun. Auf Deutsch, we say it's neutral or sächlich. Now, the other thing I want to point out is that Arm, Hand, and Haus are capitalized. This is because all nouns in German are written with a capital letter. Der Computer, die Milch, das Bier, and so on and so on. And just as every German noun is capitalized, every German noun also comes with, are you ready? A fixed gender, and therefore either a der, a die, or a das. Der Computer, die Milch, das Bier. And here's the catch. Although there are some rules for figuring out a noun's gender, and in just a moment I'll show you a few of these rules, for the most part, a noun in German is masculine, feminine, or neuter simply because it is. I mean, there's nothing about the noun per se that cries out, hey, look at me, I'm masculine, or hello, can't you see that I'm feminine? No, instead, Kaffee is masculine because it is. Milch is feminine because it is. And Bier is neuter because, well, you get the drift. Ultimately, we just have to learn a noun's gender when we learn the noun. But one tip I can give you is to learn the noun right from the start together with its der, its die, or its das. Das heißt, we shouldn't just memorize that Arm is arm, Hand is hand, and so on. Instead, we should get in the habit of memorizing the definite article together with the word. Der Arm is arm. Die Hand is hand. Das Haus is house, and so on. For some people, flashcards work pretty well. For others, writing out lists is effective. Whatever works for you, that's truly the best method. For me, I will tell you it was lots and lots of reading, making vocabulary lists, and then reviewing all these lists. But if you're less inclined to just rote memorization, I do have some good news. Are you ready? There is some predictability in German's noun-gender system, though I do stress some. For instance, if a noun refers to a human being of a specific biological sex, that noun will almost always have that corresponding gender. So the word for man is der Mann, it's masculine. The word for woman is die Frau, it's feminine. Brother is der Bruder, masculine, while sister is die Schwester, feminine. And the same logic extends to professions. So a male pilot is der Pilot. A female pilot is die Piloten. A male professor, der Professor. A female professor, die Professorin. A male opera singer is der Opernsänger. And can you guess how you say female opera singer? Richtig, die Opernsängerin. In cases such as these, when we're referring to a person of a particular biological sex or a specific gender orientation, the definite article in German will almost always correspond. Let's take another look at those female profession nouns. Die Piloten, die Professorin, die Opernsängerin. What do they all have in common besides the definite article die? Genau, exactly. Each of them has an in suffix. And in fact, this is another tip I will give you for navigating noun gender in German. Sometimes a word's suffix will tell us its grammatical gender. For example, most nouns in German that end in an E are actually feminine. For instance, die Katze, die Sonne, and die Flagge. Other suffixes that make a noun weiblich or feminine are heit, kite, schafft, and ung. So take an adjective like frei. Put on heit, and you get the feminine noun die Freiheit, freedom. Or take an adjective like glücklich. Attach the suffix kite, and what do you get? Die Glücklichkeit. The suffix schafft, on the other hand, that generally goes on nouns like der Freund. Der Freund is a male friend, but when you add the schafft suffix to it, you get the feminine noun die Freundschaft. Another example is the neuter noun das Land. Tack on Schaft at the end of it, and what do you get? Die Landschaft, which is feminine. Finally, there's the suffix ung. Now, ung loves to attach itself to verbs. For instance, the verb hoffen, to hope. By the way, as we'll see in our next lesson, the in suffix on hoffen is actually a verbal suffix. Now, nearly all German verbs end in an en. But with hoffen, if you take off this en verbal suffix and you put on the ung nominal suffix, you get die Hoffnung, hope, a noun. Or say you have the verb enden. Add your ung, and pardon my pun, you end up with die Endung, ending. Alles klar? And the cool thing is that you can make a lot of nouns with heit, kite, schafft, and ung. Now, there are also suffixes that can make a noun masculine. Two common suffixes are er and or, pronounced and or. These you find in words like der Professor, der Computer, or der Motor. I should also add that for whatever reason, practically all hard alcohol drinks in German take a masculine article. There's der Whisky, der Gin, der Vodka, and so on. I mean, even the word for alcoholic drink, as in can I buy you a drink, that word is masculine, borrowed from English. Der Trink. Finally, there are a few suffixes that make a noun neuter. Three of the most common ones you'll hear are ium, ment, ment, and chen, chen, as in the words das Stadium, das Element, and das Brötchen. The suffix chen is actually one of my favorites. Here's how it works. You stick it on tons of these nouns like das Kaffeechen, das Momentchen, das Autochen. It gives the noun the additional sense of smallness. So you take the noun das Brot, which means bread, add on the chen suffix, and what we get is das Brötchen, which is a little piece of bread or a roll. The masculine noun, der Hund, is dog, while das Hündchen is a puppy. And you'll recall earlier that I referred to myself as a little lost Hündchen when I was waiting for a dance partner in Neu-Ulm. By the way, notice something else happens in a noun when we adorn it with a chen suffix. The noun's vowel gets an umlaut. Now, you'll recall that in our last lesson, we learned the difference between the u without an umlaut, u, and the u with an umlaut, ü. Well, we just heard these vowels again in our examples, der Hund and das Hündchen. But we also heard another umlauted vowel. Das Brot, no umlaut. Das Brötchen, umlaut. And in just a bit, we're going to learn exactly how to pronounce this umlauted O vowel. But for now, just note that similar to the U vowel, which moves forward in your mouth when it's umlauted, remember it's der Hund, das Hündchen, the O vowel also moves forward in your mouth when it's umlauted. Das Brot, das Brötchen. We'll come back to this. Also dann, meine Damen und Herren, these are a few word patterns that we can use for building our vocabulary in German. But at the risk of sounding like a broken record, do remember that for most German nouns, we just have to learn their corresponding der, die, or das when we learn the noun. Here's an idea. As you lie in bed tonight, instead of counting sheep, why don't you try reciting German nouns with their definite article? Der Arm, die Hand, das Knie, der Fuß. Gut. Meine Damen und Herren, it's time to step away from our lovely definite articles and turn our attention to another essential part of the German language, its alphabet. You'll find that with just a little practice, it's not too difficult to master. Also dann, hören Sie zu und wiederholen Sie bitte. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, and finally Z. Sehr gut, meine Damen und Herren. And now let's take a closer look at a few of these letters that learners tend to have some trouble with. German J, for instance. It's always pronounced as a soft Y sound, as in der Januar, die Jacke, die Mayonnaise. German R is also a bit tricky, and in fact, Germans themselves pronounce it a few ways. Speakers in the central and northern parts of Germany pronounce it low and in the back of their throat. If you know French, it's that sound. In German, it sounds something like rot, groß, and fahren. And now that I've done my best to model this R for you, I gotta admit something. This is not actually how I pronounce my own R's in German. You see, I first learned German in Austria. And in Austria, they generally don't use the back of the throat R. Instead, they use what we call the tip of the tongue R, R. They say rot, groß, fahren. In fact, if you know Spanish, it's articulated in the same place with your tongue against the back of your teeth. But in German, we do not roll it, so it's not rot and groß. It's rot and groß. Anyway, you can decide for yourself which of the two R sounds you would like to learn. Just bear in mind that on our journey here, you're going to hear me using only the tip of the tongue R, R. I'm not going to be using the back of the throat R, R. Gut. Let's move on. Another letter that learners of German often stumble over is S. Now, in the standard variety of German, which is known as Hochdeutsch, the sound written as an S is pronounced as a voiced Z. Unless it comes at the end of a word or is written with two S's, then it's pronounced as a voiceless S. For instance, we say der See, lesen, and der Hase. But when you have two S's or the S comes at the end of the word, it's pronounced S. Der Pass, Lasten, das Haus. On the topic of voiced and voiceless sounds, two letters that my students seem to confuse quite a lot are V and W in German, pronounced V and W. Now, German V is almost always pronounced as a voiceless F. That means you don't vibrate the vocal cords. So it's viel, der Vater, der Vogel. German W, or W, on the other hand, is always pronounced as a voiced V. Your vocal cords should vibrate. So the capital of Austria? In German, it's Wien. And when you're in Wien, you can drink Wein. And this Wein is actually wunderbar. The only exception to the VW spelling pattern is in borrowed words. These are words that German has taken from another language, and words like die Vase, privat, or even the month November. The V in these borrowed words is pronounced as a voiced V, just like German W, V. Okay, there are just two more letters that I'd like us to go over before we try out our new knowledge of the German alphabet. Are you ready? There's the letter Y, Y, and the letter Z, Z. Like in English, Y in German can occur at the beginning, middle, or even the end of a word. At the beginning and end of a word, it's pronounced just like in English. Das Yoga, die Yacht, der Jack. And die Party, das Hobby, das Handy. Yes, those are all borrowed from English. And das Handy, by the way, is the word for cell phone. It makes sense, right? I mean, a handy fits in your hand and it's handy. Anyway, when Y comes in the middle of a word in German, it's actually pronounced like the U umlaut that we learned in the last lesson. Der Mythos, typisch. Die Pyramide. German Z, or Z, on the other hand, is quite a bit more straightforward. It's only pronounced one way, as a T. Now, do you hear that? T. German Z is actually two sounds pronounced at the same time, a T and a S. Die Zeit, das Herz, das Netz. You know what? Ich habe eine Idee. Let's do some spelling practice together, shall we? I'll spell out a few words auf Deutsch, and then you figure out which word I've spelled. Alles klar? Großartig. Also dann, meine Damen und Herren, los geht's. Here's our first word. A, U, S, S, P, R, A, C, H, A. What's that spell? Aussprache. Die Aussprache, a feminine noun. All right, here's our next word. Are you ready? K, A, T, Z, A. What did I spell? Katze. Die Katze, feminine. Okay, here's our last word. Aber Achtung! It's a long one. Here goes. V, I, E, D, E, R, S, A, H, A, N. What do we have? Wiedersehen. Sehr gut, meine Damen und Herren. Don't forget to continue practicing with the exercises in our workbook. On the topic of letters and sounds, earlier you might recall that I promised we'd be learning how to pronounce another umlauted vowel in this lesson, the O umlaut. Well, let's get to it. Regular German O, without the umlauts, is a pure vowel sound than English O. In German, the lips are rounded and the tongue bunches up toward the back of the throat, but we get a purer sound. O, der Sohn, das Boot, der Sohn im Boot. When German O gets that umlaut, the lips stay rounded, but the tongue moves forward. O. Do you remember the oral acrobatics we did for the U in Grüß, where our lips stay rounded for the U while our tongue creeps forward into the spot for the E? Well, it's a similar routine for O umlaut. O. One particularly useful phrase for learning O umlaut is Dankeschön. Try it. Dankeschön. Dankeschön. Now, unfortunately, this poor schön in Dankeschön has a high-profile history of being phonetically butchered. And I know that Wayne Newton was incredibly cute and charming with that voice when he crooned Dankeschön in the early 60s. But what he should have sung is Dankeschön, darling, Dankeschön. Okay, I promise that's enough crooning for me today. Let's finish our lesson by talking a little bit about the 5 countries in Europa in which German is spoken as an official language. The word for country in German, by the way, is das Land. It's neuter. We'll start with Österreich, then move to Deutschland, Liechtenstein, Luxemburg, and finally die Schweiz. Das erste Land ist Österreich. Now, many people don't realize this, but Österreich has more than 8 million native speakers of Deutsch, which makes it the second largest German-speaking country. Die Hauptstadt von Österreich ist Wien. Vienna is a bustling, multicultural city of 1.5 million people. Das nächste Land ist Deutschland. Deutschland ist so groß wie Montana. There's some trivia fodder for you. Germany is as big as the state of Montana. And there are roughly 82 million speakers of German in Deutschland, making it the largest German-speaking location per capita. Die Hauptstadt von Deutschland ist Berlin. Berlin is also one of the most popular tourist destinations in Europa. On average, 13 million people visit Berlin each year. Das nächste Land ist Liechtenstein. Liechtenstein ist sehr klein. Liechtenstein is very small, with around 38,000 speakers of Deutsch. Die Hauptstadt von Liechtenstein ist Vaduz. Vaduz is nestled nearly a mile above sea level on the Rhine River. And let me tell you, Vaduz ist sehr schön. Das nächste Land ist Luxemburg. There are around 600,000 speakers of Deutsch in Luxembourg. In fact, there are 3 official languages there: Deutsch, Französisch, French, and Luxemburgisch. Die Hauptstadt von Luxemburg ist die Stadt Luxemburg. And now to our final German-speaking country, die Schweiz. Did you catch that? I said die Schweiz. It's a feminine noun, and it takes a definite article. Now, just like in English, German words for countries usually don't have a definite article. But as we can see with die Schweiz, there are some that do. For instance, der Sudan, die USA, and der Irak. As for die Schweiz, there are more than 6 million people who speak Deutsch. And just like Luxembourg, there are multiple official languages in die Schweiz. There's Französisch, Italienisch, Romansch, and of course, Deutsch. Here's some more interesting trivia for you. Die Hauptstadt of Switzerland is neither Zürich nor Bern, nor any other city in Switzerland. There is, in fact, no official Hauptstadt of die Schweiz. The de facto Hauptstadt is Bern, but it's not officially anchored that way in the Swiss federal constitution. Also dann, meine Damen und Herren, with that, we're going to have to bring our lesson to a close. But don't go anywhere. In our next lesson, we'll be taking on personal pronouns and learning the most important verb in the entire language: sein, to be. Also dann, auf Wiedersehen und bis gleich.